Okay. Thank you. So the flip side of all of this is that there are changes, there are opportunities that are happening. There are also huge challenges and difficulties of working with big data. In your own area of work, what would you say is the biggest challenge that you're facing, and how close is the industry that you're in to finding a solution to it? Dylan?
In our business, I think the greatest challenge is clients going through the natural process of understanding exactly what they want to achieve through the use of big data tools and technologies. And that goes to my earlier point that I think professional services firms play a critical role, especially over the next probably couple of years, in giving honest and credible guidance to companies around the world on what technologies can really do for them, and walking them through a very structured process of determining what they want to achieve. And one of the panelists mentioned earlier that they're working with I think Jim perhaps mentioning an automotive manufacturer that came to him and said, I want to use big data to improve my business, and so the natural next step in the process is, well, what area of your business? And so, we as a small San Jose-based startup go through a little bit of that process, but we're, one of my roles is to line up professional service partners around the world to actually help our clients go through this process in a very efficient, structured manner so that they ultimately get the results that they need the first time around. So it's not an iterative process, it's not an inefficient process. And I think that's the greatest challenge worldwide at present. There's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of hype, and there is more and more information being disseminated, but I think the channels are clogged with hype, and there are, I would say, a number of credible folks out there that are trying to educate their clients in an expedited fashion, but it can't happen too soon.
Can I ask you what you're really looking for in a professional service partner?
Great question. It's really a couple of things. So we're San Jose based, but we're getting pulled into a variety of wonderful locations. And by the way, just as a statistic, so the companies that I showed that are some of our premier customers, I could not talk about them by name, 40% of them are in Japan, 60% are in Greater Asia Pacific, and by and large, we're supporting them out of San Jose, right? And so we've been lining up partners for the last year to help us to better serve our clients, because we don't want to grow a professional services capability. We want to keep focused on our technology and work with the professional services firms. So with regards to what we look for is, number one, can provide very, very good, credible local support to our clients who are predominantly in the Global 2000 within their time zone, and understand how they work within domain and within their culture. The other thing we look for is the ability to provide qualified lead generation that saves us time, and also with their local knowledge and knowledge of their industries and their clients, they can actually go through the process and determine when a project is right. And
so really these are people who are expert in the industry more than they are, say, in software analysis or anything like that, right?
That's a great question. We actually have partners that are experts in solutions integration for a particular geography. We have others that have been in the analytics and business intelligence field for many, many years, and are now really having the time of their lives in the new era of predictive analytics. And we have some others that are global in nature that serve every industry, most every country, and have a big data or data analytics practice.
Okay, great. Neil, from your perspective, the challenge?
Yeah, so it's a similar theme but a different approach. Again, I think the challenge that we're looking at is just, the challenge to scale a business that's, a company like the ones a lot of us are in, where your business is big data analytics, given the variety of different use cases and data sources to solve, and trying to put that together in a way that doesn't result in a series of projects, but in a set of capabilities that can scale well. And so, there's no easy answers here, but some of the things that my company is looking to do is to really lock down on high-value, ubiquitous data sources and do sets of analyses that are going to be valuable across a pretty broad set of customers so that we can prioritize and get scale without having to throw tons of bodies at every new project.
Okay, good. Jim?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of a systems integrator trying to convince customers in Japan to try these new solutions. So I'd like to break it into two halves. One is trying to get the customers to actually commit to doing a big data project, pull the trigger, make it happen. And for a while, I was under the impression that, they just kind of a question of, I always blame the companies, well, they're too conservative, they want to start with a little tiny baby step. It's hard to do a baby step because you have to do all this infrastructure and this data collection analysis and so on. And I had a discussion with one of my colleagues in Tokyo about this, and he took the opposite side. In his opinion, he said that no, in Japan, they don't really have enough power at the top of the organization, and the individual departments and groups they have the power vested in them, and they don't really talk a lot to each other. So it's hard to start a big data initiative because the executives or the board member, the CEO can't just do it, but they actually have to get all the support from all the different groups, and that can be very onerous, was his opinion. So, which of those it is, maybe he's more accurate, but, that's the first problem, is just getting them to commit to doing, a kind of big enough project. And then the second problem, from our perspective, is along the lines of, who do we partner with? Our company has extensive customer network. We know these customers really well, but we don't have a lot of, data science experience. And so there's a lot of different big data companies, some trying to provide packaged solutions, but a lot of those packaged solutions, really aren't good enough because they just would require too much customization, or package solutions might be good for like dashboarding or analytics, but not for a lot of these individual business cases. So it's very difficult to just partner with one of them. On the other hand, when it gets completely customized, well, we don't just want to be a middleman, here's this, A to Z big data provider, we'll just, interface, introduce them to our customers. And so it's this tricky spot of how do we, sit in the value chain, provide enough value, handle these different cases that aren't entirely general purpose, and and provide good services to our customers. And so it's been a long kind of internal discussion for us on how to best proceed. And we've been talking with a lot of different partners, but I think Dylan was saying too, it just does boil down to to a certain extent requiring a lot of professional services and customizations for different customers. And until we build that expertise in-house, it's a bit of a challenge in getting to that point.
Are you starting to see signs that big data is becoming a more popular approach to problem solving?
I think there's definitely a lot of visibility and demand coming from the marketplace. Another thing about our company too is we like to pride ourselves on being very customer focused, which can be good and bad. And I think in Japan is a little bit behind in some in many ways not knowing exactly all the latest advances or what's possible, or having as many examples of large cases. But I think that's changing, and that there's a lot more knowledge.
Yeah, it's
recently.
interesting you mentioned customer focus, because I've heard one person say that too much customer focus actually pushes back against innovation.
Yeah, personally, I also...
The customers are not expecting a new solution.
Well, I think there's the famous Steve Jobs quote, which I'm totally misquoting probably, but maybe you've heard it, that, well, we don't do focus groups because the customers don't know what they want until we've built it and given it to them, right? Maybe that's the opposite extreme, but I kind of do feel that our company's a bit handicapped by playing that. Well, we don't want to try out this new thing until we've heard demand from the customers first, and that does cause things to go a bit slower than it otherwise could have.
Okay, thanks. Kelly?
Yeah, as our company, our biggest challenge is that we are in the utility space. So it's pretty difficult being a startup in the utility space, where if you look at some of the S1s of some of the companies that have gone public or filed to go public recently, it's a 3-year sales cycle. And when you're VC funded and you're going to your monthly board meetings and you tell them that there's a 3-year sales cycle, they didn't really accept that answer. So we need to figure out ways to make that sales cycle quicker. And there's a massive opportunity in working with utilities in the sense that there's been a 3,000-fold increase in data, yet it's an industry that doesn't like innovation. They've been doing it the same way for the past 50 years, at least. Add in some new technologies like nuclear or some energy efficiency, But they're not used to big data, and they don't want big data. I actually had a customer of ours say, your technology's better, I have a technology, I know how to use it, I don't want to learn anything new. So, we're selling into an industry like this, and we're trying to get them to innovate. Innovation is a negative word for the most part. So we have to figure out a way, is it starting in a lab? The people who work in labs are innovative. They're kind of the subset of utilities that are. Or, as Jim mentioned, to figure out that maybe starting small isn't that bad, because at a utility you can start in a demand response group or an energy efficiency group, where a lot of our pitches, you have so many different information coming through, from a SCADA system on the distribution system management, from the meters, from electric vehicles, but all that data sits with different silos and has separate owners. So if you wanted to have a big data strategy for the entire utility, you would probably have to have about 100 people in the room to come to agreement. So I think that's probably our biggest challenge.
Yeah, are you finding any ways around it?
Yeah, I mean, we have. And like I said, a lot of it is through pilots, a lot of it's through partners. And I think, I talked a little bit about how risk-averse utilities are. We were in a utility in Asia a couple months ago for a bake-off, and it was 3 companies that had market caps north of $30 billion and us. So when not only do they have to prove that the reliability basically won't go down with a product, we have to prove to them somehow that we will be around in 5 years to service that product.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's often difficult as well.
Yeah, okay, great. Knox?
I think one of the biggest challenges in healthcare, especially in genomics, which is the area I look at, is actually how to get enough big data to do meaningful work. Because for a very rare disease, for example, even if you have a sample size of 1,000, if the chance of a person having that disease is 1 in 1,000, you may have one person. And that's not a very good sample size. So people who do work in this area need access to larger and larger sets of data. Those don't tend to be in one institution. So any given institution may be able to lay hands on a couple hundred genome sequences. Some of the most advanced ones in the world can probably bring together a couple thousand. So this is a problem where we actually need to look at approaches to bringing together data that doesn't actually require us to transfer all the data into one centralized infrastructure. And what that means a lot of times is that the analysis has to travel to the data. It's not just because of the data volumes and ownership issues and turf, there are also legal and regulatory issues. So some countries, for example, prohibit genomic data from leaving the country. So you may be able to interrogate a database in the country, get a sort of statistical answer back, but you can't actually export the raw data to do the analysis in your own cluster. So I'd say one of the biggest challenges in genomics and in healthcare in general is how do we virtually tie together all of that data without having to centralize everything? That's really acute in the United States. Other countries, Denmark, it's a small country. They have everything in one place, and it's okay. In this country, it's a nightmare because every state does things differently, and all the regulations are different.
So different state regulations. Can I ask specifically about Hipaa?
Sure. Hipaa actually is a really huge impediment in a lot of ways because it creates a chilling effect for sharing data. So under Hipaa, you have to preserve patient privacy in the data that you hold. And if you can get the patient to waive all of their rights, to say, I have no expectation that you'll keep this private, then you can release the data. But barring that, you're responsible for it. So if you're an institution, if you're a CIO in a hospital, and you need to share data, research data or patient data with someone else, another institution, you won't do that because you have no visibility over that data once it leaves your premises. You have no control over it. There's no notion of persistent governance of that information that will be enforced in the remote location as well. And so that's exactly the kind of stuff that we work on in my project at Intercos.
So is obfuscation a way around that, or how do you?
anonymization and de-identification are techniques that people use. In recent years, though, there have been a number of sort of very public attacks against anonymized data sets where, you'll have genomic data in the cloud that is scrubbed of all its identifiers, and yet you can piece together, okay, well, this person is probably, ethnically Ashkenazi Jewish, and he is probably from this location, and then you can look at the voter rolls, and you can cross-correlate all sorts of, the bad guys can do big data too.
Yeah.
Right, and so if the data is just hanging out there, even in anonymized form, it's kind of difficult to control.
So is it going to be a regulation change, or how to get around this?
I like to think that there are technological solutions, because I'd like to sell some of those. But I also think that there will be regulatory solutions there.
Okay, thank you. Yasushi, what's your take on challenges to the simulation space?
Yes, as independent software vendor, our biggest challenge is to make our software smart and simple. We have seen many companies discouraged by too much work for decision management. Actually, we conducted interviews in the US and in Japan. They agreed with the excellence of academic theory, but they were tired of doing many things for decision. So the biggest challenge is to make simple, user-friendly interface, and still smart software. So to solve this problem, we have started to design a new generation of the simulation software. Hopefully we can launch it next year.
Can I ask what you mean by smart? How would you
Yes.
characterize smart?
I mean, in this context, being smart is to make most of academic theory methodology. Yeah.
Okay.